for entertainment purposes only. And if you want true legal advice, contact your own lawyer.
We're nationwide. We are syndicated all over the place. Our radio law talk, but we're not necessarily picking on California, but this is just some big topics that have come out of California, and that happens a lot. New York, California, a lot of stuff. But California's war on private property is an issue here. I mean, we got the Fifth Amendment and the 14th Amendment, the Due Process Clause, and the Fifth Amendment, the Taking Clause, basically protects property rights. Now, the issue here is, in Oakland, California, and this is true in the Bay Area, San Francisco, Oakland, it's very expensive to live. I mean, it's just almost impossible to live there to make enough money. And there's these companies coming in and buying these homes and flipping them. They buy them, they renovate them, and they flip them and make good money because very wealthy people or people that do well, a lot of them in the industry, the computer industry, come in and they buy those homes and it's close to work. So what's happened is there's a woman who has 2 little children, decided to squat, moved into a house that was vacant, and they some say she broke in, and others say no, it wasn't a break-in, she just somehow walked in. To me, look, it's not your house. You don't just walk in it. To me, that's breaking in. But semantically, they're saying that, quote, wasn't a break-in. She just went in there, moved in, and says now she has the right to live there as long as she wants while it's vacant.
Well,
because she has rights. Because she has a right, and this is going to be a constitutional argument, a human right to have housing. That's a right she's claiming.
Right, and you got to get to the bottom of Oakland, and lots of Bay Area cities are exactly the same. There are so many people that are homeless,
right?
And they have all these investors that come in and buy up the property, and they're keeping them empty until the opportunity to flip them comes, and the markets are such that they can make money.
Right.
So there's a huge argument that this should not be occurring. These huge investors should not be allowed to hold on to property that's empty. They need to put it for public good. And
that's a property right issue. Whew.
I know.
You're opening a can of worms.
I hear you.
Sounds like eminent domain.
Yeah, but we're going to talk about that when we come back, and we will get into property rights and what's called adverse possession too. And after we do that, when we come back from the break, we're going to talk a little more about that. We're going to argue both sides.
Oh, that's down.
This is Radio Law Talk. And now, back to the show.
Yeah, it's real life in California here in Oakland where property rights owners are saying you don't have a right to come in and adversely possess or take our properties just because you are homeless and need a house. And that's what their argument is. There are rules and regulations, and every state's different. Make sure you look at your state because even if they walk in your house and sit in your house or squat in your house, there are ways you have to kick them out. It's not just walk in there and throw them out. You have to go through a process. There's a thing in California and other states also, because it's all different. But there's a thing called adverse possession. That's where you go in and take over a piece of property, and there's ways of doing that. It's old-fashioned law out of England that is kind of antiquated. But for example, and again, don't quote me on all the details because I don't handle this area of law, but I know in general, for example, there's certain things to adversely possess or take over a piece of property. You have to pay taxes for 5 years on the property. You have to be there. There's a number of factors, and it's difficult to do that.
Yeah, you have to be open in your possession. It has to be hostile to the owner's title and right to possession, and you have to continuously possess it for 5 years. And then you have to pay the property taxes on it for 5 years.
And when we talk about being open and hostile, it's to protect against something like this. Let's say Fred owns 100 acres in Northern California, and there's a cabin up there, and Fred never goes there, and some guy sneaks on the property and lives in that cabin for 5 years, and just nobody knows he's there, and Fred's paying the taxes every year on the property. The guy can't come out at that point and say, "Oh, I've been here 5 years or longer. It's mine," because nobody knew he was there. It's got to be an openly contested thing so that you can essentially go to court to say, look, the homeowner knew I was there. They did nothing to kick me out, to do anything. I was there. They knew I was there. It's all about giving notice, and I wasn't told to leave. So, But yeah, it is 5 years, and you have to pay the taxes for 5 years. And so in this case that we're talking about here in Oakland, clearly the adverse possession elements weren't met, but they're trying otherwise to still be able to gain access of the home for...
They have to be deemed to have possession. Actually, with this type of a case, it arises out of a lease, or some sort of a contract, or a renter-tenant type of a or landlord-tenant type of a situation. And in this case, the Moms for Housing,
yes,
they don't have anything like that.
Well, that's a good argument. They're arguing that this is, quote, big predatory banks and real estate speculators that are coming in that are kind of pushing these people out because they can't afford it, and no one should be homeless. This is their argument, the plaintiffs. No one should be homeless while an investor owns a home that's sitting empty. Now, I say this, and I say that because I've brought this up before, and we're going to argue both sides. A quote. I'm going to quote this. Predatory big banks and real estate speculators and wealthy real estate people, basically, is the argument. So if that's the case, I always bring this up, why can't you go rob a bank? And that should be legal because they're big money, they have money, and they're rich. Therefore, is it legal to rob a bank? That's my question, Denise, on that side. So because they're, quote, predatory banks and they're big, wealthy real estate speculators, does that mean that they have no rights under the Constitution, just like this other individual? And
well, we know they do.
They do. But
do.
that's their argument.
Yeah, the question is, what can a locality like the city council or county commission, what can they do when they do have these empty houses that are investment houses, and they have such huge population of homeless? What can they do?
So there's a mechanism in place that happens all the time when the government needs property that is privately owned for some legitimate governmental purpose. And if the locality here decides that it is in the government's interest that a private individual no longer have the right to control their property because another individual needs housing, and the government wants to come in and force the homeowner to allow another person to live there, then this falls, in my opinion, under something akin to eminent domain, because the government is saying, we have a governmental interest that overrides your individual interest in this property, the governmental interest being providing housing for the homeless. And so you have to let them come in and live there. Well, if that's the case, if they have taken away the right to exclude from the property owner under eminent domain, then they are responsible, in my opinion, for paying the homeowner the reasonable fair market value of that property. And if it's temporary, it can be rent. If the people come in and destroy the property, then the government should be on the hook for it. But that's the mechanism.
You pay what it's worth.
Yeah, but to take it from them with no compensation to the homeowner, no fair market value compensation to the homeowner is not right. And to the argument that people have the right to housing, look, housing for everyone would be great, but I believe that the word right is overly expanded. The word rights really arises and starts when you consider the Declaration of Independence, which reads that all people, I'm going to say people instead of men because it's 2020, all people are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with inherent and certain inalienable rights. That means you have the right to this. You enjoy this thing for no other reason than the fact that you exist. And in the Declaration of Independence, they have said that among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay? Now, there might be other things, but I think it's very difficult for somebody to say, because I exist, I am entitled to housing. Or because I exist, I am entitled to government-funded health care. Well, what about people who exist that have no governments? What about people who exist that live in an area where there is no housing? Okay?
But they're not Americans, though.
But the thing is, the Constitution says you're entitled to this because you exist and the Creator endowed you with this.
Gotcha.
Everybody, no matter what country you live in, you get these.
So
these rights are
look,
yours, right?
The need for housing may be something, but it's not a right. It's not a right. It maybe the government should provide it. Maybe that should happen. But it's not a right on par with the other rights that we enjoy, like freedom of religion, the right to free speech, the right, to keep the government. Rights are things that exist to keep the government from taking stuff away from you, not things that exist that require the government to affirmatively give it to you.
So it's interesting on this. I've read a couple of arguments, both sides, but one of the arguments is the issue is they're talking about the state of California has made it so costly and expensive to remove people from homes that it's cheaper, easier, and less of a hassle for them just to leave them vacant. They would love to probably temporarily put someone in, and that's what the argument is. A lot of these big companies say, I want to put someone in and get some rent while we're there, but it's so cumbersome and difficult to kick them out, it's worth just leaving it vacant. And I know of a person that actually happened. They have a house, and they're like, you know what? We're just going to leave it vacant because they want to sell it, but they've got it for about 8 months. They're just going to leave it vacant because it's too much of a hassle.
How big the aggrieved party is irrelevant. The homeowner. Well, a big company is just a big bank. That's like saying stealing from Walmart is less theft of stealing from a small private merchant. It doesn't matter. Theft is theft.
Right.
That's a key point. I don't think that's come up in this discussion. If you're trespassing, you can't say, well, it's just Bank of America or whatever. No, you're trespassing. That's what.
Yes.
That's just me. But,
if there is a right to housing, the right to housing says that the government cannot come in and tell you you're not entitled to own a home. If there's a right to housing, it is a right to protect people from the government from saying you can't have a house. It's not a right to say the government to come in and have to provide you with a house. They just can't keep you from having one.
I think an interesting thing is you bring a mother with 2 small children, wonderful, probably beautiful family, and it pulls at the heartstrings. And that's why I think the judge took it under submission.
Go to the website, radiolawtalk.com. That's radiolawtalk.com.